Have you ever been treated like you're worthless by the people who are supposed to love you? Have you ever sat in a room full of family members who looked at you with such disgust and contempt that you wondered if you even belonged there? Well, let me tell you what happened to me at my cousin Rebecca's wedding, because that day changed everything, and I mean absolutely everything about how I saw myself, my family, and what true success really means.
My name is Sarah, I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of the day I went from being the family joke to someone they could never ignore again, though not in the way any of us expected. It was a Saturday afternoon in late September, one of those perfect early autumn days when the weather can't decide if it wants to hold on to summer or embrace the coming fall. The sun was shining through scattered clouds, creating these beautiful patterns of light and shadow across the manicured lawn of the grand Bellevue estate, where Rebecca had chosen to have her wedding. Everything was picture perfect, from the white silk ribbons tied around every chair to the elaborate floral arrangements that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The air smelled of expensive perfume, fresh roses, and that particular scent of old money that seems to cling to certain venues and certain people. I remember standing in the parking lot for what felt like an eternity, my hands gripping the steering wheel of my modest Honda Civic, watching other guests arrive in their Mercedes, BMWs, and Teslas. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and my palms were sweating despite the cool breeze coming through my partially opened window. I knew what was waiting for me inside. I knew the looks, the whispers, the barely concealed contempt. You see, in my family, success has always been measured by very specific standards. The right job title, the right car, the right neighborhood, the right everything. And by their standards, I had nothing. Absolutely nothing worth bragging about at cocktail parties or family gatherings. For the past 3 years, I had been working as a janitor at a large corporate building downtown. Yes, a janitor. I cleaned offices, emptied trash cans, mopped floors, and sanitized bathrooms. My shift started at 6 in the evening and ended at 2 in the morning, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 when they needed extra coverage. My Aunt Linda, Rebecca's mother, had made it abundantly clear that my presence at the wedding was tolerated, but not celebrated. When the invitation arrived, it had come with a phone call, one of those conversations that stays with you because of how much it hurt. She had said, and I remember every single word, "Sarah, honey, we're sending you an invitation because you're family, but please understand that this is a very upscale event. Rebecca has worked so hard to create the perfect atmosphere, and well, we just want everyone to feel comfortable. Maybe you could sit toward the back during the ceremony, and perhaps you might want to leave before the reception gets into full swing. You know how these things are, people start asking questions about what everyone does for work, and it might be awkward for you." The way she said awkward for you made it clear she meant awkward for them. But I went anyway, because some part of me, some stubborn, hopeful part that I've had since childhood, wanted to believe that family meant something more than job titles and bank account balances. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, someone would be happy to see me simply because I was me. I took a deep breath, checked my appearance one last time in the rearview mirror, and stepped out of my car. I was wearing the nicest dress I owned, a simple navy blue sheath dress that I had bought on sale 2 years ago and had worn to every semi-formal event since. My shoes were comfortable flats because I couldn't afford heels, and honestly, after years of being on my feet all night at work, heels felt like torture devices. My hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and I had applied makeup carefully, watching YouTube tutorials to make sure I got it right. I thought I looked presentable, even nice. But the moment I walked through those ornate doors into the reception hall, I felt every inadequacy magnify 1,000 times over. The women were dripping in designer labels, their jewelry catching the light from the crystal chandeliers overhead. The men wore suits that probably cost more than 3 months of my salary, their watches gleaming gold and silver on their wrists. And then there was me, simple Sarah, in her sale rack dress and drugstore makeup, walking into a world that had never wanted her in the first place. I found my assigned seat, and just as Aunt Linda had suggested, it was toward the very back of the ceremony space, tucked into a corner near the door to the kitchen, where the catering staff kept rushing in and out. The chair next to mine was empty, and I realized with a sinking feeling that I had been seated alone, separated from the rest of the family sections by several rows of Rebecca's college friends and her fiancé's coworkers. It was a deliberate isolation, a physical manifestation of where I stood in the family hierarchy. As I sat down, I could feel eyes on me, heads turning, whispers starting. I pretended not to notice, focusing instead on the beautiful arrangements of white lilies and pale pink roses that adorned the altar area. The string quartet was playing something classical and lovely,
and I tried to lose myself in the music, to let it carry me away from the uncomfortable reality of my situation. But then my cousin Marcus walked by with his wife Jennifer, and he did an actual double take when he saw me. "Sarah? Oh, wow. I almost didn't recognize you sitting back here. How are you doing? Still working that cleaning job downtown?" His voice wasn't quiet, and several people nearby turned to look. Jennifer, who had always been polite but distant, gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That's so nice that you could make it," she said, her tone suggesting it was anything but nice. "It must have been quite a journey from your neighborhood to get here." The emphasis on your neighborhood was slight but unmistakable. I lived in a modest apartment complex on the east side of town, an area that my family had always referred to as transitional, which was their polite way of saying they wouldn't be caught dead living there. I smiled, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was racing. "The drive was fine, thank you. You both look wonderful." Marcus nodded, already looking past me toward more interesting conversations. "Well, enjoy the ceremony. We should catch up sometime, hear about your, work adventures." They moved away, and I heard Jennifer say something to Marcus that made them both laugh, though I couldn't make out the words. My cheeks burned, and I felt that familiar sensation of wanting to disappear, to sink into the floor and cease to exist. This was exactly what I had expected, what I had steeled myself for, and yet it still hurt more than I wanted to admit. Have you ever felt like you're living in two completely different worlds at the same time? Because that's exactly how I felt sitting in that chair, watching the ceremony space fill up with people who had known me my entire life, but seemed to see right through me as if I were invisible. The ceremony began with all the traditional pomp and circumstance. Rebecca looked absolutely stunning in her custom-made wedding gown, a creation of silk and lace that probably cost more than I made in a year. Her groom, Tyler, came from even more money than our family, old wealth that stretched back generations. His family sat in the front rows, looking every bit as elegant and composed as you might expect from people who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. The ceremony itself was beautiful, I won't deny that. The vows were personal and touching, the music was perfect, and when they kissed as husband and wife, everyone applauded with genuine joy. For a moment, watching Rebecca's face light up with happiness, I felt genuinely happy for her too. Whatever our differences, whatever judgments existed between us, she was my cousin, and she was radiating pure joy in that moment. But then came the reception, and that's when things really went from uncomfortable to unbearable. The reception was held in an enormous ballroom that had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. Thousands of tiny lights were strung across the ceiling, creating the illusion of stars. The tables were covered in crisp white linens, each centerpiece a work of art featuring cascading flowers and elegant candles. A live band was setting up on a stage at one end of the room, and I could see the bar area where bartenders in crisp black vests were preparing for the evening's festivities. I found my assigned table, and my heart sank even further when I realized I had been seated with distant relatives I barely knew, and a few people who appeared to be last-minute additions to the guest list. This wasn't the family table where my parents would have sat if they were still alive. This wasn't even close to where the rest of my generation of cousins were seated. This was the equivalent of being put at the kids' table, except I was a grown woman being told exactly how little I mattered. As dinner was served, an elaborate multi-course meal that included items I couldn't even pronounce, the conversations around me buzzed with talk of vacations, investment portfolios, career advancements, and private school admissions for children. I picked at my food, which was admittedly delicious, and tried to participate in conversations when directly addressed, but mostly I felt like an observer at someone else's life. Then Uncle Richard, my father's brother and someone who had always been particularly status-conscious, approached our table with a drink in hand, and that particular look on his face that meant he was about to say something he thought was clever. "Sarah! There you are, hiding in the back. How's the sanitation business treating you?" He laughed at his own joke, and several people at nearby tables turned to look. "Still pushing that mop around, or have you moved up to management? Maybe they've got you supervising the other janitors now?" The words hit me like physical blows, each one carefully calculated to diminish and demean. I felt my face flush hot, my hands trembling slightly as I set down my fork. "The work is honest, Uncle Richard. Someone has to do it." He waved his hand dismissively, the ice in his glass of bourbon clinking against the crystal. "Oh, I'm sure. Nothing wrong with honest work. It's just, well, your father had such high hopes for you. Full scholarship to that fancy college. And then you went and dropped out to do what exactly? It's been, 10 years now since you threw away that opportunity? And this is where you ended up. cleaning up other people's messes. Literally. He laughed again, louder this time, and I could see Aunt Linda watching from across the room with an expression that might have been pity or might have been satisfaction. It was hard to tell. Other family members were starting to take notice now, the circle of attention growing. My cousin Rachel came over, wineglass in hand, her designer dress shimmering under the lights. "Uncle Richard, are you giving Sarah a hard time about her career choices again?" She turned to me with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "You know, Sarah, I actually think it's kind of admirable in a way. I mean, not everyone needs to be ambitious or successful. Someone has to do the jobs nobody else wants, right? And you seem perfectly happy in your little apartment, with your little life. There's something to be said for knowing your limitations and accepting them." The condescension in her voice was suffocating. She continued, addressing the growing audience now rather than me. "I was just telling my therapist last week, you know, the one who has an office in Manhattan anyway. I was telling her about our family dynamics, and she said that every family has someone who just doesn't quite measure up to the others. And that's okay. That person serves as a kind of reminder of what not to do, what paths not to take." And I realized she was talking about situations exactly like this. I wanted to respond, wanted to defend myself, wanted to tell them all that they had no idea what they were talking about, but my throat felt tight, and words seemed impossible. This was worse than I had imagined. This wasn't just casual dismissiveness or subtle exclusion. This was active, deliberate humiliation, performed for an audience, designed to put me in my place and keep me there. Uncle Richard clinked his glass with his wedding ring, gathering even more attention. "You know what, everyone? I think we should do a toast. A toast to all the successful people in this room. Everyone who's made something of themselves, who've built careers and lives worth celebrating. And let's also toast to those who remind us why education matters, why ambition matters, why pushing ourselves matters. To success." He raised his glass high, and several people actually joined in the toast, laughing and drinking while I sat there feeling like I was being crushed under the weight of their judgment. Tears were threatening to spill over, and I bit the inside of my cheek hard, using the pain to maintain control. I would not cry in front of these people. I would not give them that satisfaction. The humiliation continued throughout dinner. Every few minutes, someone would make another comment, another joke at my expense. My cousin Brandon asked loudly if I could give him tips on getting tough stains out of carpet since I was such an expert at cleaning. His wife Amanda wondered aloud whether janitorial work offered benefits, or if I had to rely on government assistance. Even some of Rebecca's friends, people who didn't know me at all, felt emboldened to join in after seeing how the family treated me, making assumptions about my education, my intelligence, my worth as a human being based solely on my job title. I excused myself before the main course was even finished, mumbling something about needing air. I walked quickly toward the bathroom, my vision blurred with unshed tears, my chest tight with humiliation and anger, and a deep, profound sadness that went beyond this one evening. This was the culmination of years of being treated as less than, years of being the family disappointment, the cautionary tale, the one whose name was mentioned in hushed, pitying tones. I locked myself in a stall in the ladies' room, and finally let the tears come, silent sobs that shook my whole body. How had I ended up here? How had my life become something that gave other people permission to treat me like I was worthless? And more importantly, why did I keep subjecting myself to these situations? Why did I keep hoping that somehow, someday, they would see me differently? After several minutes, I heard the bathroom door open and the click of expensive heels on the marble floor. I held my breath, trying to silence my crying, but whoever it was had definitely heard me. "Sarah? Is that you in there?" It was my cousin Michelle, one of the few family members who had always been relatively kind to me, though we hadn't been close in years. "I saw you leave, and I wanted to check on you. Are you okay?" I wiped my eyes and opened the stall door. Michelle was standing by the sinks, her expression genuinely concerned. She was wearing a beautiful emerald green dress that complemented her dark hair perfectly, and she looked so put together, so confident, so much like she belonged in this world of wealth and status. Everything I wasn't. "I'm fine," I lied, moving to the sink to splash cold water on my face. "Just needed a moment." Michelle watched me in the mirror, her reflection meeting mine. "They're being horrible to you out there. Uncle Richard especially." "I'm sorry, Sarah. You don't deserve that." Her kindness almost broke me all over again. "It's what they think of me, Michelle. It's what they've always thought. I'm the failure, the one who didn't live up to the family expectations. And maybe they're right. Maybe I am exactly what they think I am." Michelle shook her head firmly. "Don't say that. Don't let them make you believe that." A job doesn't define a person's worth.
You know that, right? I wanted to believe her, but in that moment, standing in that opulent bathroom in my discount dress with my tear-stained face, it was hard to feel like anything other than exactly what my family had labeled me. We stood there in silence for a moment before Michelle spoke again. Are you going to stay for the rest of the reception? I looked at my reflection, at the evidence of tears and hurt written across my face, and I made a decision. Yeah, I'm going to stay. I came here for Rebecca's wedding, and I'm going to see it through. I won't let them drive me away. Michelle smiled and squeezed my hand. Good for you. And Sarah, for what it's worth, I think you're braver than any of them. It takes real courage to face this kind of treatment and still hold your head up. She left, and I spent a few more minutes repairing my makeup and composing myself. When I looked in the mirror again, I made a promise to myself. I would go back out there, I would endure whatever else they threw at me, and I would remember this feeling. I would remember every cruel word, every dismissive look, every moment of humiliation. Not because I wanted to wallow in it, but because I never wanted to make anyone else feel this way. I returned to the reception just as the speeches were beginning. Rebecca's maid of honor was giving a touching toast about friendship and love, and everyone was focused on the head table where the bride and groom sat looking radiantly happy. I slipped back to my seat, hoping to go unnoticed, but Uncle Richard caught my eye and gave me a smirk that made my stomach turn. The evening continued with more dancing, more drinking, more conversations that I was excluded from, or included in, only as the butt of jokes. I watched couples swirl across the dance floor, watched my cousins and their successful spouses laugh and celebrate, watched a world that I was in but not part of, present but invisible except when they needed someone to look down on. At one point, I found myself standing alone by one of the large windows that overlooked the estate's gardens. The sun had set, and the outdoor lights had come on, illuminating the perfectly manicured hedges and flower beds. I was lost in thought, wondering for the 1000th time that evening why I had come, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Quite a view, isn't it? I turned to find Tyler's father, Mr. Harrison Montgomery III, standing there with a glass of champagne. He was a distinguished-looking man in his early 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. It's beautiful, I replied quietly, not sure why he was talking to me. We had been introduced briefly during the receiving line, but I hadn't expected him to remember me, let alone seek me out for conversation. You're Rebecca's cousin, correct? Sarah? He remembered my name. I was genuinely surprised. Yes, sir. Sarah Mitchell. He nodded, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. I couldn't help but notice you seem to be having a difficult evening. Family gatherings can be complicated affairs, can't they? There was something knowing in his tone, something that suggested he understood more than he was saying. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. He continued, You know, I've built my career on understanding people, on seeing past the surface to what really matters. It's served me well in business and in life, and I've learned that the people who endure difficulty with grace are often the ones worth knowing. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment before he spoke again. Enjoy the rest of the evening, Sarah. I suspect it may be more interesting than you anticipate. With that cryptic comment, he walked away, leaving me confused but oddly comforted. What did he mean? How could the evening possibly get more interesting than it already was? I returned to my table as the cake was being cut, watching Rebecca and Tyler perform the traditional feeding of cake to each other while cameras flashed and guests cheered. The DJ announced that Rebecca would be throwing her bouquet soon, and all the single ladies were called to the dance floor. I deliberately stayed seated, having no desire to participate in that particular tradition, especially given how the evening had gone. But then the music changed, and the DJ's voice came over the speakers with an announcement that made everyone pause. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. We have a very special announcement from the father of the groom, Mr. Harrison Montgomery. Mr. Montgomery took the microphone, looking as composed and distinguished as ever. Thank you all for being here to celebrate this wonderful union of our families. Tyler and Rebecca, you've brought us all such joy today. But I have some additional news that I'd like to share on this auspicious occasion. He paused, and the room fell completely silent. As many of you know, Montgomery Industries has been exploring a significant expansion through a merger with another major corporation. After months of negotiations and planning, I'm delighted to announce that as of Monday morning, we will officially be joining forces with Beacon Global Solutions in what will be one of the largest mergers in our industry's history. The room erupted in applause and excited murmurs. Montgomery Industries was Tyler's family business, a massive corporation with interests in technology, real estate, and finance. A merger of this magnitude was huge news.
the kind of thing that would make headlines in the business sections of major newspapers, but I couldn't understand why he was announcing it at the wedding, or what it had to do with anything. Mr. Montgomery held up his hand for silence, and the room quieted again. Now, this merger means significant changes for both companies. There will be restructuring, new leadership positions, and exciting opportunities for growth. In fact, the new CEO of the combined entity is someone who has been instrumental in making this merger possible, someone whose vision and leadership have been nothing short of extraordinary. My cousin Brandon shouted out, "Is it you, Dad Montgomery? Are you staying on as CEO?" Mr. Montgomery smiled. "No, actually. I'll be transitioning to chairman of the board. The CEO position is going to someone younger, someone with fresh ideas and an incredible track record of success. Someone who, interestingly enough, is here with us tonight." The murmurs grew louder. People were looking around trying to figure out who he was talking about. I saw several of Tyler's groomsmen straighten up, clearly hoping it might be them. Uncle Richard was practically vibrating with excitement, probably imagining business connections and opportunities. Mr. Montgomery continued, "Before I introduce our new CEO, I want to share a little story. 3 years ago, this person walked into my office for a meeting that would change both of our companies forever. They didn't come with fanfare or pretense. In fact, they came from a meeting in the very building where they worked night shifts, ensuring everything was clean and ready for the next day's business. You see, this person worked as a custodian in the building that housed both my company's offices and the headquarters of what would become our merger partner. And during those late-night shifts, while cleaning offices and conference rooms, they saw things. They noticed patterns. They understood business dynamics that most MBAs miss entirely. They saw an opportunity that no one else had seen. My heart started pounding. This couldn't be. This absolutely could not be what I thought it was. This person approached me not as a janitor, but as someone who had been observing, learning, and preparing for years. They presented me with a comprehensive analysis and proposal that was so brilliant, so innovative, that I immediately brought them into our strategic planning division. Over the past 3 years, they've been working behind the scenes, climbing the corporate ladder at an unprecedented pace, all while maintaining their cover, so to speak, because they wanted to understand every level of how our organizations worked. The room was completely silent now, everyone hanging on his every word. My hands were shaking. This was impossible. This was absolutely impossible. This person holds an MBA from Stanford, which they completed through an executive program while working full-time. They have an undergraduate degree in business analytics, which, yes, they did step away from initially, but returned to complete through night classes and online courses. They are brilliant, dedicated, and the perfect person to lead our merged company into the future. Mr. Montgomery's eyes scanned the room and landed directly on me. "Sarah Mitchell, would you please join me up here?" The room exploded in shocked gasps and confused whispers. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to process what was happening. This was real. This was actually, impossibly, incredibly real. Michelle was staring at me with her mouth open. Uncle Richard had gone completely pale. Aunt Linda looked like she might faint. Rachel's wine glass had actually slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. I walked toward the front of the room on legs that didn't feel like my own, my heart hammering so hard I thought everyone must be able to hear it. Every eye in the room was on me, but the expressions had completely changed from earlier. The contempt and dismissiveness had been replaced with shock, confusion, disbelief, and in some cases, something that looked like fear. Mr. Montgomery handed me the microphone, and I stood there facing a room full of people who had spent the entire evening treating me like I was worthless. My family, who had mocked my job, my life, my choices. Rebecca's friends who had joined in the mockery. Tyler's business associates who had looked through me like I was invisible. And now they were all staring at me, waiting for me to speak, trying to reconcile the janitor they had ridiculed with the CEO designate standing before them. I took a deep breath, and when I spoke, my voice was surprisingly steady. I think some of you are confused right now, and I understand that. Let me clarify. Yes, I have been working as a janitor for the past 3 years at the Stellar Tower downtown. That was a real job, and I did it to the best of my ability every single night. But it wasn't my only job. It was my cover, my way of being invisible while I learned everything I needed to know about the companies I would eventually be leading. I paused, looking directly at Uncle Richard. You asked me earlier if I had moved up to management in the sanitation business. The answer is yes. I've moved up quite a bit, actually. From custodian to strategic analyst to senior vice president to, as of Monday, Chief Executive Officer of Montgomery Beacon Corporation. A company that will have over 15,000 employees and annual revenues exceeding $3 billion. The number hung in the air. $3 billion. The company I would be running was worth more than everyone in this room combined could probably imagine. Uncle Richard's face had progressed from pale to a shade of red that suggested either anger or embarrassment or possibly a medical emergency. I continued, my voice growing stronger. I need to thank some people. Mr. Montgomery, thank you for seeing potential in me when I was literally emptying your trash can. Thank you for giving me a chance to prove myself when I walked into your office with a proposal that took me 6 months of late nights to prepare. Thank you for mentoring me and believing in me. I turned to face my family. And I need to thank all of you as well. Every dismissive comment, every condescending remark, every moment of humiliation you've put me through over the years, including tonight, every single one of those moments taught me something valuable. They taught me resilience. They taught me that people's opinions of you matter far less than what you know you're capable of. They taught me that the loudest voices in the room are often attached to the emptiest minds. And most importantly, they taught me exactly the kind of leader I never want to be. Aunt Linda stood up, her face a mixture of emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. Sarah, I don't understand. If you had this position, this opportunity, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were just a janitor? Why let us treat you like you were a failure? I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something that surprised me. Not anger, not even satisfaction at this reversal. Just sadness. Sadness for how shallow their love had always been, how conditional their acceptance was. Because I wanted to know, Aunt Linda. I wanted to know who would love me when they thought I had nothing. I wanted to see who would treat me with kindness and respect when they believed I was at my lowest. And I got my answer tonight, didn't I? The moment you all thought I was beneath you, you showed me exactly who you are. Not everyone, Michelle. You were kind to me when I needed it, and I won't forget that. But most of you showed me that your love, your respect, your basic human decency, all of it comes with conditions and price tags. The silence in the room was deafening. Rebecca, who had been silent through all of this, finally spoke up, her voice small and uncertain. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. If I had known who you really were, I never would have. I held up my hand, stopping her. That's exactly the problem, Rebecca. You're sorry because of who I turned out to be, not because of how you treated me. You're apologizing because I'm going to be a CEO, not because you were cruel to someone you thought was just a janitor. Don't you see how that's actually worse? If I had stayed a custodian for the rest of my life, would I have deserved the treatment I got tonight? Does anyone deserve to be humiliated and mocked simply because their job isn't prestigious enough for you? Tyler stepped forward, looking uncomfortable. Sarah, on behalf of my family and myself, I apologize for anything that was said or done tonight that hurt you. I hope we can move forward professionally and personally. I nodded. I appreciate that, Tyler, and I want to be clear. This merger is going to go forward. My personal feelings about tonight won't affect my professional judgment. Montgomery Beacon is going to be an incredible success, and I'm going to lead it to heights that neither company could have reached alone. That's a promise. Mr. Montgomery took the microphone back. I think we've had enough drama for one evening. Sarah, I know this isn't how you wanted this announcement to be made, and I apologize for putting you on the spot like this. But I felt it was important for everyone here to understand that character, intelligence, and capability can't be measured by job titles or surface appearances. Now, let's all please return to celebrating Rebecca and Tyler's beautiful wedding. The DJ, reading the room brilliantly, started playing upbeat music again, and gradually the normal flow of the reception resumed, though nothing felt normal anymore. Groups formed, whispering urgently. People kept glancing at me, some with embarrassment, some with newfound respect, some with what looked like anger or resentment. I excused myself from the crowd that had started to form around me, people who suddenly wanted to talk to me, to congratulate me, to pretend that the last few hours hadn't happened. I walked back outside to the gardens, needing air and space and a moment to process everything that had just occurred. I found myself back at the same window where I had spoken with Mr. Montgomery earlier. His cryptic comment now made perfect sense. He had known what was coming. He had seen me being mistreated and had known that the evening was about to take a dramatic turn. I stood there looking out at the gardens and tried to sort through the complex tangle of emotions running through me. There was satisfaction, certainly, at seeing the shocked faces of people who had been so cruel. There was vindication in proving every single one of them wrong. But there was also sadness, a deep and profound sadness, because this moment had revealed something I could never unknown. My family's love was transactional. Their respect was conditional. And no amount of success, no job title, no achievement would ever change the fundamental truth that they had shown me who they really were when they thought I had nothing to offer them. Quite an evening, isn't it? Michelle had joined me again, 2 glasses of champagne in her hands. She offered me one, and I took it gratefully. That's one way to put it, I replied, taking a sip. The champagne was excellent, probably ridiculously expensive, just like everything else at this wedding. Michelle shook her head in amazement. Sarah, I knew you were smart. I knew you had potential. But this? CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company? How did you even pull this off? I smiled, a real smile this time. Hard work, Michelle. An incredible amount of hard work, sacrifice, and strategic thinking. While everyone here was judging me for my janitorial job, I was working 80-hour weeks between that job and my other responsibilities. I was studying, learning, building relationships with people who saw past the mop and bucket. Mr. Montgomery gave me a chance, but I had to earn everything that came after. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Michelle spoke again, her voice softer. Are you okay? I mean, really okay? Because I know tonight must have been awful before all of this came out. I considered the question. Was I okay? I'm processing, I admitted. Part of me wants to feel triumphant, wants to revel in proving everyone wrong. But mostly I just feel sad. Sad that it took this reveal for people to treat me like I matter. Sad that my own family couldn't show me basic kindness without knowing my net worth or job title. Sad that this is who we are as people. Michelle nodded slowly. For what it's worth, you've given me a lot to think about. I've been part of the problem too, even if I wasn't as bad as Uncle Richard or Aunt Linda. I've let your job define how I saw you, how much effort I put into our relationship. That's on me, and I'm sorry. Her apology felt different from the others. It felt real, earned, thoughtful. Thank you, I said simply. That means something. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Uncle Richard tried to corner me to talk business opportunities, suddenly very interested in reconnecting with his niece now that I could potentially be useful to him. I politely but firmly told him that all business inquiries should go through my executive assistant, whose contact information I would provide him if he was serious. Aunt Linda attempted to give me a tearful apology, but her words rang hollow, full of excuses about misunderstandings and assumptions. Rachel avoided me entirely, which was probably for the best. Several of Tyler's business associates introduced themselves. Their attitudes completely changed from earlier in the evening, when they had looked through me like I was furniture. Now they were all smiles and networking pitches, business cards appearing like magic. I collected them politely but made no promises. Rebecca pulled me aside near the end of the reception, tears streaming down her face. Sarah, please, I need you to know how sorry I am. Not just for tonight, but for years of being part of this family's treatment of you. You're right about everything you said. We should have loved you regardless of your job, respected you regardless of your income. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry. I looked at my cousin, at her genuine distress, and felt my anger soften slightly. Rebecca, I appreciate your apology, and I do forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was before. What happened tonight revealed truths that can't be ignored. Moving forward, if we're going to have any kind of relationship, family or otherwise, it needs to be built on something more substantial than job titles and social status. She nodded, wiping her eyes carefully to preserve what was left of her makeup. I understand. And I want that too. I want to know the real you, not the version I assumed you were. We hugged, and in that moment, I felt a small flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from all of this pain. As the reception wound down and guests began to leave, I found myself saying goodbye to people with a strange mixture of emotions. Some of the goodbyes were genuine, connections with people like Michelle who had shown me kindness, or who seemed genuinely interested in rebuilding our relationship on new terms. Others were perfunctory, going through the motions with people I knew I would probably never see socially again. Mr. Montgomery approached me one last time before I left. Sarah, I apologize again for the way things unfolded tonight. That wasn't how I envisioned announcing your appointment. I shook my head. Actually, sir, I think it might have been exactly what needed to happen. Sometimes people need a wake-up call, and tonight was definitely that. Besides, if this had come out any other way, I might have spent the rest of my life wondering if they would have treated me differently if they had known. Now I don't have to wonder. I know exactly who everyone is. He smiled, a knowing expression crossing his face. That's the kind of wisdom that makes you the right person to lead Montgomery Beacon. You understand people, Sarah. You understand what motivates them, what reveals their true character. That's going to serve you well in the years ahead. We shook hands, and I left the reception, walking across the parking lot to my modest Honda Civic. Several valets looked confused when I headed toward it instead of calling for a luxury car, but I just smiled at them. This car had served me well through some of the hardest years of my life. It had gotten me to my night shift janitorial job and to countless early morning classes. It had been reliable when nothing else in my life felt certain. I wasn't ready to give it up just because my circumstances had changed. As I drove home through the quiet streets, the events of the evening played through my mind on repeat. The humiliation, the revelation, the shock, the confrontations. All of it felt both surreal and crystalline in its clarity. I had walked into that wedding as one person and was driving away as someone completely different, not because my circumstances had changed. I had been the CEO designate all along, but because the illusions had been shattered. I no longer had to wonder if my family would love me unconditionally. I knew they wouldn't. I no longer had to hope that kindness would be shown to me regardless of my status. I knew it wouldn't be. But I also knew something else. I knew that I was stronger than their judgments. I knew that my worth wasn't determined by their opinions. I knew that I had built something incredible through sheer determination and hard work, and that no one could take that away from me. When I got home to my modest apartment, I kicked off my shoes, removed my jewelry, and sat on my couch in the quiet darkness. Monday morning, I would step into my new role officially. I would lead Montgomery Beacon into a new era of growth and success. I would manage thousands of employees, make decisions that affected millions of dollars, and prove every single day that Mr. Montgomery's faith in me was well placed. But tonight, I was just Sarah. Sarah who had been hurt deeply by people who should have loved her. Sarah who had experienced a vindication so complete it almost felt fictional. Sarah who had to figure out what came next, not just professionally, but personally, relationally, emotionally. I thought about my parents, both gone now for over a decade. They had raised me to value education, hard work, and integrity. They had taught me that worth came from character, not from status symbols or job titles. I wondered what they would think of tonight's events. I think my mom would have been proud of my success but heartbroken at how her family had treated me. My dad would have probably wanted to confront Uncle Richard and give him a piece of his mind. But they were gone. And I had navigated this journey alone, which made the achievement somehow more meaningful and more lonely all at the same time. As I sat there in the darkness, I made a series of promises to myself. I promised that when I led Montgomery Beacon, I would create a culture where every employee, from the CEO suite to the custodial staff, was treated with dignity and respect. I promised that I would never forget where I came from, or the lessons I learned during those 3 years of working night shifts, while building my career in secret. I promised that I would use my platform to advocate for people who were overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed because their job titles didn't impress the right people. And I promised that I would be careful about who I let into my life going forward, that I would build my inner circle from people who had proven they could love me without conditions, who could respect me without needing to be impressed first. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The merger news broke publicly on Monday morning, and my appointment as CEO was headline news in multiple business publications. My phone rang constantly with interview requests, congratulatory messages from business contacts, and unfortunately, messages from family members who suddenly wanted to reconnect. I had to hire an actual assistant just to manage the flood of communication. Uncle Richard sent me a long email about a business opportunity he wanted to discuss. I deleted it. Aunt Linda left several voicemails asking if we could have lunch and talk. I didn't return the calls. Rachel sent me a friend request on LinkedIn with a message about how proud she was of me. I ignored it. But I did accept Michelle's invitation to coffee. We met at a small cafe near my new office building. Nothing fancy, just good coffee and honest conversation. She didn't ask me for anything. She didn't pitch business ideas or try to leverage our relationship. She just wanted to know how I was doing, and that meant everything. "You've changed," she observed, stirring cream into her coffee. "There's something different about you since the wedding." I considered her words. "I think I've just stopped pretending. Stopped hoping that people will be better than they've shown themselves to be. Stopped waiting for acceptance from people whose acceptance was never going to come without strings attached. That's liberating in a way, even though it's also painful." Michelle nodded. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since that night. About my own values, about what kind of person I want to be, about how I've let status and appearances dictate too much of my life. You've inspired me to make some changes." We talked for over 2 hours, and by the end of it, I felt like I had at least one family member I could trust, one relationship that might actually be worth rebuilding. It wasn't much, but it was something. My first day as official CEO of Montgomery Beacon was both terrifying and exhilarating. I walked into the executive suite wearing a designer suit that I had finally allowed myself to buy, my confidence bolstered by the knowledge that I had earned this position through merit, not luck or connections. The board of directors meeting that afternoon went smoothly. I presented my vision for the merged company, outlining strategic initiatives that would leverage the strengths of both organizations while addressing their respective weaknesses. The board members, initially skeptical about such a young CEO, were won over by the end of the presentation. Several came up to me afterwards to express their support and excitement about the company's direction. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came later that week, when I was walking through the corporate headquarters building and ran into Maria, one of the women who had worked the custodial night shift with me during my 3 years in that role. She looked shocked to see me in executive attire, clearly having heard the news but not quite believing it. "Sarah? Is it really you? They're saying you're the new CEO, but I thought maybe it was a different Sarah Mitchell." I smiled and walked over to her. "It's really me, Maria. The same person who worked alongside you cleaning these offices for 3 years." Her eyes filled with tears. "You were always so kind to all of us. Always treated us like we mattered. And now look at you. You made it. You really made it." I hugged her, not caring that some executives were walking by and witnessing their CEO embracing a custodian. "Maria, I made it because of people like you. You and the rest of the night crew taught me more about work ethic, dignity, and resilience than any business school ever could. Don't ever think that what you do doesn't matter. This company runs because of people like you, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows that." I followed through on that promise too. One of my first initiatives as CEO was to implement significant improvements to wages and benefits for the company's support staff, including custodial workers, administrative assistants, and maintenance crews. I created a tuition reimbursement program for any employee who wanted to pursue education, regardless of their position. I established a mentorship program that deliberately paired executives with employees from all levels of the organization. Some of the board members questioned these expenditures, arguing that they didn't directly contribute to the bottom line. I shut down that argument quickly. These expenditures contribute to creating a company culture that values every employee, that recognizes that our success is built on the contributions of everyone who works here, not just the people with the impressive titles. If we want Montgomery Beacon to be an industry leader, we need to be a leader in how we treat our people first. That's non-negotiable. The initiatives were implemented, and within 6 months we were seeing reduced turnover, increased productivity, and a significant boost in employee satisfaction scores. It turned out that treating people with dignity and respect was actually good business, not just good ethics. Several months after the wedding, I received a handwritten letter from Rebecca. In it, she reflected on the events of her wedding night and the soul-searching she had done since then. She wrote about how that evening had forced her to confront uncomfortable truths about herself and the family culture she had been part of perpetuating. She didn't ask for forgiveness or try to excuse her behavior. She simply shared her journey and thanked me for being the catalyst for her growth. I wrote back, a shorter note but a genuine one, telling her that I appreciated her letter and her honesty. I suggested that maybe we could start fresh, building a relationship based on who we both were now rather than who we had been. It wasn't a grand reconciliation, but it was a start. Uncle Richard, on the other hand, never quite recovered from the wedding revelation. His business, which had always been moderately successful, hit some rough patches, and he reached out multiple times asking for advice, connections, or direct business with Montgomery Beacon. I remained professional but distant. I didn't use my position to hurt him. That would have made me no better than he had been, but I also didn't go out of my way to help someone who had shown me such cruelty. Some bridges once burned aren't worth rebuilding. A year after the wedding, Montgomery Beacon had exceeded every projected benchmark. Our stock price had risen significantly. We had successfully integrated the two company cultures, and we had launched 3 new products that were performing beyond expectations. Business publications were writing profiles about my unconventional path to the CEO suite, and I had been invited to speak at several conferences about leadership and organizational culture. But perhaps my proudest moment came when I was invited to give the commencement speech at the business school, where I had finally completed my MBA. Standing at that podium, looking out at hundreds of graduates and their families, I shared my story. I talked about working as a janitor while building my career in secret. I talked about the wedding where my family humiliated me for my job. I talked about the revelation and its aftermath. And I talked about the lessons I had learned through it all. Success isn't about proving other people wrong, I told them. It's about proving yourself right. It's about knowing your worth even when no one else sees it. It's about maintaining your integrity when it would be easier to compromise. It's about treating every person you encounter with dignity and respect, regardless of their job title or social status. It's about building something meaningful, not just something impressive. After the speech, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I've been working 2 jobs to pay for school, and I've been so ashamed when my classmates ask what I do. Your story reminded me that there's no shame in honest work, regardless of what kind of work it is." I hugged her and shared my contact information. "If you ever need advice, a reference, or just someone to talk to, reach out to me. I mean that." She did reach out several months later, and I ended up hiring her as a junior analyst at Montgomery Beacon. She's now one of our rising stars, and I love knowing that I could pay forward the opportunity that Mr. Montgomery had given me. Looking back now, 3 years after that fateful wedding, I can see how that evening was a turning point in my life, though not in the way anyone expected. Yes, it was the night my secret success was revealed, the night my family's true colors were shown, the night everything changed. But more than that, it was the night I finally stopped seeking validation from people who were never going to give it freely. It was the night I learned that the people worth having in your life are the ones who treat you well when they think you have nothing to offer them. It was the night I discovered that my worth was inherent, not dependent on external validation. I still drive that same Honda Civic sometimes, even though I could afford any car I wanted. It reminds me of where I came from and keeps me grounded. I still keep in touch with Maria and several other members of the night custodial crew from my early days. They remind me that every job has dignity and every person deserves respect. I still remember every cruel word said to me at that wedding, not because I want to hold on to bitterness, but because I never want to inflict that kind of pain on anyone else. So here's what I want you to take away from my story. Your worth is not determined by your job title, your income, your social status, or anyone else's opinion of you. Your worth is inherent, intrinsic, unchangeable. The people who can't see that are revealing their own limitations, not yours. And when you do achieve success, however you define it, remember how it felt to be dismissed and underestimated. Use that memory to drive you to treat everyone you encounter with kindness and respect. Build your success on a foundation of integrity, hard work, and genuine care for others. That's the kind of success that lasts. The kind that means something beyond just impressive numbers or fancy titles. Have you ever been underestimated or dismissed because of your circumstances? Have you ever had to prove yourself to people who had already decided you weren't worth their time? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Share your experiences, your struggles, your victories. Let's build a community that recognizes and celebrates the inherent worth in every person, regardless of their current circumstances. And if this story resonated with you, if it touched your heart, or made you think differently about success and worth, please leave a like. It helps more people find this message, and maybe someone out there needs to hear it today. Don't forget to subscribe to my Truth Revealed Tales for more stories about resilience, triumph, and the complicated truth of human relationships. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thank you for listening to my truth. Thank you for seeing me, not just as a CEO or a success story, but as a person who has struggled, been hurt, and found a way forward. Remember, your story matters. Your worth is inherent, and no one gets to define your value except you.